now we would bring that back in the report to determine where that would come from.
Absolutely.
And why is there a school bus in there?
Fire department.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor, there's some other components to this project that are pretty significant when we look at this. When we look at the site here, one of the things we're required to meet is when we consume land, we have to meet the Crown's expectation when we're consuming lands. We all know in local governments we control the use of the land, but the Crown controls the consumption of the land. The consumption of this land must meet the Mines Act requirements. Across the road, we have an active mine where the site canal is. On this side here, we would actually need a mines permit to be on this site, to be actively consuming the land. Even to be importing stuff into the site requires us to be acting under the Mines, or conducting ourselves under the Mines Act. The Mines Act is very strict. It is one of the oldest pieces of legislation. So one of the things we're doing right now is investigating within our organization and how this transpired. We can see the erosion is continuing on, but one of the things we know we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go back to the Ministry of Mines and let them know what's happened here. There may be some further implications to the city on this. The reality is if the Crown doesn't get paid, the Crown is generally not that happy. We know that, but the best thing that we can do here is work for the remediation and then work through this process to determine what's happened. We don't know where the excavation has happened. We don't necessarily know all the details yet. We know that we brought in some blacktop here. We see the bus in here. There's a couple of tanks up in the top or in the midsection of the photo on the right. There's a few things that we really have to address. We have to address the groundwater because it's created an ecosystem. It then creates an environmental assessment that's required. So all these different things are triggered. But what we're doing right now today is we're just identifying and letting council know that we've received this letter and we're moving forward. Staff is going to move forward with the next steps and then report back to council before anything else transpires. So there's a lot of whys right now, and we'll get back to council on why those whys are there.
Any other questions or concerns? So all in favor of the motion? Councillor Thompson, Councillor O'Shea. So carried. Next item on the agenda is again from our engineering services, an application for a development variance permit to construct an accessory building on a property located at 7580 16th Street. Can you give us a big description before we make the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We received a development variance permit application for sorry, I'll go to the slide. For interior lot line setback variance from 5 feet to 2 feet, and to vary the ratio of the principal building to the accessory building from 50% to 93%. This property is currently zoned R1. There already is an existing building right here that's 1,120 square feet. Under our zoning bylaw, the accessory building can only be 50% of the principal residence. So he would be, or the applicant would be permitted 1,160 square feet. Because our zoning bylaw doesn't have a definition for density, council has the ability to vary this. For example, if we would have had something in the bylaw that would have said you could have an accessory building that's 5,000 square feet per acre, then council can't vary that. They're not allowed. You're not allowed to vary land use or density. But in this case, because we don't have a definition for it, council can't vary that. That is the proposed building. That is the location, 7580 16th Street. It's the cross-hatched area there, lot number 4. That is the front of the home. And that would be where the building would go. So under the Local Government Act, we have to let the surrounding property owners know that this development permit application has come in, and we need to afford them the opportunity to come speak at the May 4th Committee of the Whole meeting, and then council can make a decision based on feedback that they get at the regular meeting of council that evening.
Okay, so may I have council that have a motion to receive the application contingent on public input and approval. Also, that staff will advise council on site, size and density of structures as per our bylaws. Councilor Shagan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fan is here. I have a question in regards to what is this building going to be used for?
RV and car storage.
Okay, it's not a shop that's gonna, no, any sort of, okay. Thank you.
Point of order. We have a motion being put forward. Can I have a motion?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Councilor Shagan, do I have a second? Councilor Ross. Discussion. Sorry.
I asked my question in order, but I got the answer I was looking for. It's all good, thank you.
Do we have any other questions or concerns? Councilor Hammond.
On the drawings, the schematic of this, it says originally it was 20 feet by 40 foot 2 by 10 feet, and it's been crossed out to 50 feet in length and 13 feet high, is that correct?
That is correct. The reason being that
Excuse me, sir, could you identify yourself, please?
my name is Harold Copan, and the reason for that is for future, when I sell the place for an RV storage for a motorhome, it has to have over 12 feet so it can go into a building. And that was the reason for extending the height of it, but it'll still be under 60 feet high. The other thing is this building isn't on a footing. It is just on the ground. It isn't,
It's not on concrete.
no, it's designed to just sit on the ground. So the question I really have is whether or not this could be considered a temporary building or not, because it has no footings.
Trustee Mr. Allen, does that fall in the parameters of a movable building when it comes to that size of a structure?
I think that we have to be defined, Mr. Mayor, in our zoning bylaw. I think it's one of those gray areas that, relates to shipping containers, these other things. And really the saving grace for council is the amount of density they allow on the property to coverage, right? Because we're talking about, that's what keeps the integrity of your neighborhoods, is if everybody has 100% coverage or 93% coverage of their properties, then you don't really have the feel in the neighborhood of a, green spaces and these types of things, or just that, overall density is very, it's part of the community feedback that we get. The key to this though right now is going back to the zoning bylaw to determine, what regulatory pieces that we have in play there, whether that's a temporary building or a permanent structure. But bringing it back down to lot coverage is going to be the most important thing for council to consider here and what the neighbors' feedback is.
Also, based on that, do we not have a bylaw in place where even C-cans have to have a proper foundation now?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that I'm not sure, I have to defer that one over to our building inspector if he's not here. Oh.
Manager level building
Oh.
inspector.
There he is.
Still here.
He said,
So what was the question?
The question is, do we have a bylaw in place where even C-cans have to have a proper foundation now?
No, not a bylaw as per se for CCAN foundation, but the CCAN size exceeds the 10 or 100 square foot limit on a building permit. So that through the building code, we want to have a foundation under, whether it be compacted gravel, concrete piers, or a pad to support the can.
So would this apply also to this structure?
With the engineered drawings, this structure, I believe, can be attached to the ground with anchors. I don't think it has to have a concrete footing, but I haven't gotten into the plan to really look at it yet.
Also being susceptible to wind loads, obviously, it would have to be, because it's quite a big building.
Yeah.
Councilor Cronin.
Yeah, just a quick question through you.
like there's no, or it's stated that there's no foundations required, but I did look at a similar building and they didn't say foundations were required as per the standard, you know, long wall foundations, but they did have it sitting on sonotubes. Is this similar? Do you have to drive the sonic tubes in?
No, there's anchors that are screwed into the floor, into the ground, the same as what the cables on telephone poles that go into the ground.
Okay.
They're a similar type of screw that anchors the building to the ground.
Would you be planning to have a slab on the inside?
Eventually, probably.
Would that not deem it then becoming more permanent once you put
No.
a slab?
Well, I'm allowed to put as much concrete on my property as I want. There is no limit to the amount of concrete that you can have on your property.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Copan, on the picture, and perhaps Sasha, you could go back, of the backyard, there is an arbor, and then I think it's your existing shop that you have.
And the one at the house.
Yeah, and then there is what appears to be a garden shed.
You want me to go to the photograph?
To the photograph, yeah.
Yep.
Is that yours or is
Yeah.
that your neighbor's?
That's mine.
Okay, thank you.
On my property, I've already got 3 temporary tents that I want to get rid of, which are an eyesore. And that's the reason I want to go to one building rather than having these plastic tents all over my property.
Oh, so that would be.
That was one of them right there,
Okay, thank you.
right beside the shop.
I have one quick question on the plan. It doesn't show the distance between the existing shop and the new building. What is the distance between?
About 6 feet.
6 feet to our CAO or to our building inspector. Is that within the realms of our bylaw? Is it not 9 feet normally between a building and a residence?
5 feet.
5 feet is acceptable. Thank you. Councillor Hammett?
On the aerial photo, I'm not seeing a lane access. Do you have back lane access?
Yes, there is, right in that corner of my property.
Oh, from the corner, okay, and so you don't have a house directly behind you then? Like the back of your property, you don't have a neighbor's property right back?
No,
And
I
there's a
back
lane
onto a
separate,
neighbor's property right behind me.
But their house is up.
Out at the front, right there in that corner is an old chicken barn down lower. Sorry,
What's the length of your actual property?
330 feet.
Oh, so it was pretty deep.
It's a half-acre lot.
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, so for the process for everybody today will be the, if council elects to direct staff to proceed with the notices to the neighbors, then that would precipitate more discussion, because the neighbors came back and council did a little bit more research on some information that we have. That would allow council the ability to make a better decision. I think one of the things that the most important part of this is the community consultation with the neighbors directly adjacent in the proximal area, and those that have a general concern regarding lot coverage in our community. So I think for today's purpose, if we could, if council sees fit to pass the motion, then what will happen is it'll take the next steps, and then it'll come back to council for further information.
Yes. Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We do have a motion on the table contingent. So any other questions or concerns? So all in favor of the motion? So carried. Thank you. Our next item is the manager of emergency services. We'll be speaking on the fire hall rear parking lot entrance.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, Council. As you all know, we've ordered a new fire truck, which should be here sometime in May. And the new piece of equipment is a little bit bigger than our old fire trucks and our old ladder truck. Currently, when we go on our calls and we come back with our engines, we back them in off of Second Street into the front bays. Our engines are all sitting in the front bays. With the new ladder truck, and it's probably about 15 feet longer than any of our existing trucks. We can back it in off the street. It'll be fairly tight, especially in the summer when it's really busy. But what we're proposing is to bring it in through the rear parking lot. And we do have drive-through bays in our at our fire hall. So, and that was one of the intents when they first built the hall in 1986, was for that purpose, in case they wanted to drive apparatus through for parking. Much easier for the guys, much safer for the guys or for the crew. Having said that, by doing that, we would have to remove that existing island that's sitting there, because right now there's two small entries into the rear bays, and those yellow parking blocks there would have to go. And we would make one main lane right down through the middle where that herringbone of parking is, right there on the lines that you can see in the picture. So that's the way the engine would come in, which works out good, except for by doing that, we're eliminating parking for our volunteers in the event that we get a call out. So the other part of the proposal would be the removal and or the relocation of the recycling bins, which are right beside. That would suffice the parking that we need for our volunteers. Okay. Any of the funds and with discussions from the former manager of operations and the new manager of operations, the funding for the work would be done out of the operations budget, the City Works operations budget. Not a lot of cost involved with the whole thing. As far as the fence, I'm not sure whose fence that is. It would have to be removed quite likely, but I'm not sure whose that is. I spoke with Rob McGregor from the regional district last week, and he wasn't sure whose fence it was. He thinks it's theirs, but he's not sure. Anyways, so that would be our proposal moving forward. And like I say, that's with the arrival of the new ladder truck in May.
So we have a motion. I recommend to approve the proposed parking lot entrance change and removal and relocation of the recycling bins to provide adequate volunteer firefighting parking at the April 20th, 2015 regular meeting of council. Councillor Rashagan, Councillor Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just get started, one of the things that we're going to have to be cognizant of is the fact that the commercial diversion of waste for the businesses downtown, they look at the recycle bins as part of the process. Keeping in mind that we have recycling facilities within 1 kilometer at the landfill, the same services are offered there. The amount of maintenance that'll reduce in the downtown core for the regional district and the cost of the city for the provision of that service will be reduced. The most important thing, though, that the fire chief was talking about was the parking for the volunteers. We have such a great volunteer fire department in our community. We're very, very fortunate. The one thing we want to be considerate of is providing them safe, easy egress to the buildings in the event that there is a response. The last thing we want to see is the firemen parking further and further away from the building and trying to get to the fire hall. Then we know that the golden hour is the most important thing when they're on a rescue event or a fire event. The golden hour is one that that people always refer to, but it is it's the most important thing that we can look at here. And with this new fire truck, we're investing over $1 million in a fire truck, and I believe that to consider how we look after that device is very important. So we don't want it to be subject to, the guys aren't driving it all the time, so we want to make it as easy as possible to move it in and out of the facility. So it's something for council to consider in this discussion.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, right across the street and beside Whispers of Hope, there is a city-owned parking lot. Is that would that not suffice for volunteer parking?
It would, although it's over 200 feet away. And
Oh, okay.
when you're a volunteer and minutes count.
Sure. Okay. I didn't realize it was that far.
Yeah.
Councillor Krog. I like the idea of the easier access, and especially from the back. So it was mentioned, but if you are backing in fire trucks, then you're probably blocking the main road while you're doing it. So it makes a lot of sense. The only concern I have is one that's been going on for years and years and years and years, and that's the relocation of the recycling services that are there. It's been debated on, I don't know, 3 or 4 different councils that I've sat on, and it's ended up staying there for a specific reason. Yes, there's more facilities within a kilometer, or I think it's a little over a kilometer, but it doesn't have that same usability by the commercial core, where every day you see employees walking stuff over to that, not driving it up to a landfill. And again, as if the business closes at 5:30, the landfill is already closed. People have argued that the site is messy. Recycling sites do not mess themselves. People, inconsiderate people do, right? So I don't have an issue with that. It's just, it says relocate or remove. There's no plan B. There's no, we're gonna site it here type thing. So I can definitely support that. Obviously, it's gonna be referred to another meeting and we'll vote, and I can support the parking lot adjustments. Not 100% sure if I can support the removal. And I guess I look at it like, okay, this is where the truck is gonna come back after the fire. So the truck is not gonna be in the parking lot when the volunteers arrive. It's after it's done, after the emergency's over, that the truck would be headed back for its bay. I believe I'm correct in that.
You are, although I think it would be fairly inconvenient to have all those volunteers move their vehicles so we can get that truck in there.
It would be fun.
It would, yeah. I guess that would be fun. Yeah, it would be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun. Yeah, so.
It'd be like a rodeo.
Yeah, just a heads up that unless there's a place to relocate those bins, I'm just not too sure about it. Gentleman in the back.
Les Johnson. I was just, when I was doing my little video on where to put the bins, I was looking at the parking lot across the street. That's the Fireman's Park parking lot you would?
Yeah.
Okay, so at first I was going, well, it's only 200 feet, but then I realized, well, 2 things about that. One, they'd be crossing an actual road in a hurry, and that could be potentially hazardous. And the other is, if we ever really got busy downtown, that's a public parking space, right?
Yeah.
So they
That's
could
right.
come to work and have to park down the street and look at
Somewhere.
parking
That's right.
while the 40 people are waiting to get out to the fire, right? Okay, that, I'm just curious about that, so. Go
I
ahead.
have a question to our CEO, Mr. Allen. Based on Councillor Crog's statement of the not public works, the landfill, is there a possibility that the hours could be adjusted?
That would, Mr. Mayor, that would come at an additional cost that would have to be borne. Now, we talked about potentially relocating. If that was needed, we could explore that with the regional district on some options for the relocation of bins. We could look at if council really wanted to keep that as an additional service on top of curbside collection and the provision of the landfill hours along with this. We can still provide it. It'd just be a matter of determining where it can go, the best locations for it. I believe that this is one of the probably been one of the most sensitive topics that Councillor Crog has talked about. It's been a staple in the community that people have been not wanting to let go of. But I think as we move through this process now with the fire department, if we're going to relocate them, maybe we find a more suitable location if that's the will of council.
The gentleman in the back.
Thank you, Mayor. Terry Jarvis, I would just like to confirm with what Councillor Crog has said, that having used the recycling as recently as yesterday, there was people literally lined up to use the 4 bins that were there, and they were all full. I think if we try to go out to the landfill, unless the hours are changed dramatically, we're just asking to have a bunch of this stuff laying all over town, because people are not going to go to the landfill when it's not open, obviously. If we're going to have a real business, we don't allow the people to, myself included, to have these bins somewhere else that's reasonably convenient on a 24-hour basis. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a queue here. Councillor Hammond.
Just two things. A few years ago, I remember we used to have, and I know these are owned by RDKB, am I correct?
Yes.
So, the decision to move them and where to move them would ultimately be, I'm sure, RDKB's.
And Mr. Mayor, it's a service that we asked the RDKB to provide us, so we pay for that service. It would be contingent on their trucks being able to back in and unload them safely and load them safely. There would be their requirements that go with that, so.
So, a few years ago, I remember that they had bins up on Lansing Drive, and they're no longer there. So, I'm wondering what transpired that they were removed. Bottle Depot is up there. They have the electronic recycling up there. It made sense to keep it all together up on Donaldson Drive.
Where the bins out on Dawson Drive in front of the Alpine operation?
Oh,
Alpine's bin?
perhaps that was when Alpine had the contract, yes. Yes, okay, correct. The second thing I wanted to mention was, you're taking away that curbing and the vegetation to allow for the truck to swing in. Is there, and so that curb, as we see it right now, is the edge of the road. Is there gonna be a barrier with an actual drive, like a visible driveway, or is it gonna be exposed? Because I'd like to see some vegetation and some more curbing, like, so that it's got the feel.
Yeah, I think that the proposal eventually would be to, and on either side, if you are familiar with the parking lot at the rear, on either side, there is some landscaping vegetation on either side, and then you have the two narrow driveways, and then the middle island. So that island would go out, and my proposal would be, and not this year, hopefully next year in the budget, would be to extend that vegetation farther. So we've got one dedicated center lane through.
Right.
Right, and then obviously there'd be some landscaping vegetation that would be put in.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, just one more question. I noticed that there's always been a sign there saying there's a camera watching the site. I'm just curious whether anybody actually collects stats on when it's used and how much it's used. Like the gentleman was saying, it was quite busy this weekend, and on long weekends and opening weekends, it's a horror story at times. I'm just curious.
Yeah, and we have nothing to do with that camera. That camera is a regional district camera.
Okay.
And I believe it feeds back up to the landfill. And I'm not sure if they monitor it or what they do.
Councillor Rasheed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would there be any possibility if these bins were relocated to the landfill that there could be discussions in regards to adjusting their fence line to allow these bins to be placed outside of their fenced-in property to allow access 24 hours a day, no different than it is now?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, we own property across the street from the landfill. The city owns land there. To set up a transfer station there, I mean, I think once we'd have to consider the regional district on the ability to continue to work under the contract, because they clean up the site, they look after it. So if we're going to invest into that, yeah, it would be definitely something. As alternative locations would come up, I would recommend that council or committee of the whole consider this today, refer it back to staff for basically basically notice to the neighbors in the adjacent area, and then we'll bring it back to council for any sort of feedback or letters. And then what we'll do is we'll move forward with the options for relocation. But the reality, I think the fire chief has indicated that the fire truck and the volunteers require that area. I think that's kind of, we've elected to provide that service first as a foremost from a life-saving perspective. I think as we move to the alternatives, I think that's what we need to get the feedback in from the public, and I would encourage council to approve the motion, refer the motion back to staff and ask us to get some more feedback and then bring it back to a regular council meeting.
Councillor Krog.
Yeah, just couple of things already been discussed why they're not up in front of Alpine anymore. There are recycling facilities already at the landfill, and it's if you do have a vehicle and you are going recycling, I tend to go up to the landfill. I like the different bin selections. They have wider slots. and it's easier to do some recycling there. But this was a huge part of trying to keep it where it was the commercial sector, which doesn't really have that service. So the commercial sector, but it's used by the population. Yes, we offer curbside recycling every second week, but for avid recyclers, they're the ones that are using that. So just wanted to say that when we refer it back to staff, just because that sounds like where it's going, has the parking lot been looked at for realignment, or we just figuring that this is the straightest route for the truck? But if we change the layout and the marking of the parking lot, can we somewhat achieve closer to what we have? And the kicker is, in the back of my memory, which is a very dark place, there is a thought that actually the RD owns the land. So we need to make sure, because I know that the fence was there, and I remember when it was in, and I thought it was either a lease or they actually physically owned the land. So we need to double check that.
Okay, as far as I understand on the land, the city owns land.
Just make sure, because it would
Yeah.
be bad.
I will for sure, but I've been doing a little bit of digging into that. Everybody I talked to, including Mr. McGregor from the RDKB, had all indicated that the city owns land.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just to add to that, if that was RDKB land, that would have had to be, the road would have had to be closed. There would have been a road closure bylaw. The title would have had to been, the property would have had to been surveyed off, title raised at land titles, and the disposition of the land. There would be a long track of it in our records. So it would, what Councillor Krog is talking about, there would probably, there has to be some sort of responsibility falling on the regional district. So it may be a lease, like he's saying, or something along those lines. We've asked for the service, and we said, here, you can have this little.
But we're going to be referring back to staff in any event,
So just double check.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. For me, the biggest issue is the safety of our community with fire services, and the ability to get the fire equipment safely into the fire hall at the conclusion of a fire, and further the ability for our volunteer firefighters to access the hall in a timely fashion in order that there's no unnecessary delays. Yeah, I agree that the recycling is an important issue for some, and I would certainly support having our staff do some research and consulting with the regional district with respect to relocation or the need to relocate those bins. And so I'm going to support the recommendation that's on the table.
Lady in the back, please.
Yes, Gloria Cook. I'm wondering if you couldn't just reduce the number of bins there so that you do leave some access to bins there, one or two, whatever, and then relocate the rest elsewhere, because it is a very handy spot for that end of town.
That's a good suggestion, and we'll refer it back to staff. Thank you. Any other further questions? Johnson?
In doing a little promo for this very item here, I ran around a few places just to throw things out there for people to think about. And I have some questions about at least one of the places behind the CIBC, where there used to be a hotel here in town, but burned down a long time ago. Is that owned by the city, or is that something? So I'm not sure if that's enough space or not, but that's right downtown. It's a block away. There's a green space behind the Christian Center. I don't know whether they own that or the city owns that. It's not paved. It's part of the extension of the parking lot. It's downtown as well. It's two locations.
Thank you. Addressing to staff, Mr. Allen, Would staff also be able to do a research to see how many municipalities actually have recycling bins in their center core?
Yep, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. We could bring back a report that would identify options for properties in the downtown core. We would bring back some options that would show some other properties in the surrounding area. I know that transfer stations are a way of the past. They're not very typical anymore. Transfer stations are generally, the landfill is considered to be a transfer station because it's a waste diversion site. We bury some waste there, but generally small transfer stations are non-existent because everybody's moved to the curbside. But the challenge is for the commercial people. The commercial folks don't have that diversion stream because they have to get large trucks with the bins in their alleyways to put the recycling in, and that poses a big challenge for them. So we will bring back a report that if council wishes, that will identify some options in the downtown core that would let you know of any other or communities that have transfer stations and what they look like, and if they're in the downtown core or not. And then we communicate out to the residents and the businesses in the area that this is what we're looking at, and seek some feedback for council.
Possibly an industrial park could be another solution,
Absolutely.
so that we keep the beautification of the city and without having containers in the downtown core. Councillor Crog.
Beautification of the downtown core shows an active recycling community. That's what we need. Now, if it's anywhere downtown, that would make sense to me because of that. If we are going to ask how many people have transfer stations located downtown, the second question has to be, do they provide or is there access for commercial recycling? So, and then when they do their recycling, is it every week? So it's like if you're going to compare apples to apples, just make sure that if they don't have one downtown, do they do their curbside once a week? And is their commercial sector looked after? Because it's half commercial and half just people or residential and stuff like that. If we are looking at another site such as the old Province Hotel, then that may be a better option. It may be a win-win because that piece of property is currently kind of used as a four-wheel drive parking lot, I guess, for want of a better word. So yeah, if we're going to get that information, just make sure that we have apples to apples. Like I say, I'm not married to it being there. I just don't want it to leave the downtown.
Councillor Rasheed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've discussed this at length here, and I think this discussion will continue once the report comes back. And with that being said, we'll call questions.
So do we want to make an amendment to the motion to refer it back to staff?
Yes.
May I have a motion?
To refer,
Yeah,
because the
refer.
original motion
Was to approve it.
Yeah.
We don't have the ability to approve at this level.
No, but to send it forward for approval at the
Okay.
April, whatever. So if we send it back to staff.
So do I have a second on that? So all in favor of the motion to refer? So carried. And still have the original motion. All in favor of the original motion?
If you're referring it, it'll be.
Refer, we don't have to carry the second one, yeah, we'll leave that and drop off.
Second one, we'll make it.
All right, we now have highlight reports, monthly highlight reports from the department managers. The item is staff request for council to receive the monthly activity reports from the department managers, starting with building and bylaw services.
Mr. Mayor, I can go through the reports. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Mayor, the building inspection and bylaw services is working on the process for the enforcement of the deer feeding bylaw, following up on complaints, dealing with camping along the riverbanks, following up on there was a camp that was set up in behind the cemetery, so we've had an issue in there. The building inspection component, the following up on building permits, flood damage and fire damage property repairs, building inspection permits. You can see there's been several that have been taken out. But this year, the value of permits is just over $731,000, which is a good sign. Mr. Mayor, moving on to the Chief Financial Officer's report. The Chief Financial Officer has been very busy working on the auditing process. So we talked about this with council, but our independent auditor has been in, which is regulated under the community charter. The auditor comes in and takes a look at the municipal statements and finances, and then reports back to council in an independent body to let them know if how things are going. The introduction of the financial plan has been undertaken. We're preparing the tax rate options for council to consider today. That discussion will happen shortly. The audit training, and we talked about some personnel issues in the report, Mr. Mayor, just ongoing internal issues. The corporate services, corporate and community services, obviously preparing agendas, human resource functions, ongoing records retentions after the City Hall fire. That's a big process. You'll probably hear about that from staff for the next 12 to 16 months. Participation in the outdoor recreation show, which went very well. The city staff went down and had a booth there in partnership with the chamber. I think they handed out over 500 pamphlets in respect to the city of Grand Forks, and there was videos and many things being shown there. The participation in the land development workshop on March 19th. So the provincial government was here talking about their exercise in raising capital with lands that are owned by the city and options for the city to consider. This is a process that the provincial government adopted that we undertook here in the city of Grand Forks, that they're utilizing for provincial mechanism that all 13 of their economic development officers are using now. The manager of development and engineering has held will participate in that workshop. Strategic engagement process at City Hall, which was very well received. There will be a report coming out shortly on that. The development inquiries, we're starting to receive a lot of development inquiries at this point. We've looked at a couple of rezoning applications, the development variance permits, working on the asset management component of our organization. That's been an in-depth process for us, and we'll have that open house tomorrow night for council and the community to come hear about how we're doing with asset management. And the community of Golden will be speaking, their previous mayor will be speaking on behalf of that. We've continued on with the climate action revenue and investment survey. The fire chief has been busy with a total of 51 calls. You can see the details of those calls. Volunteers, the continuing education of the volunteers. Public education, fire extinguisher training at the RDKB staff. It was a request for staff at the aquatic center. Working on the budgeting, and you can see that the snowpack readings that the fire chief will monitor for flooding is 75% of normal this year. Where I think there's a little bit of a situation that we see happening in California with the drought conditions. We don't know how that's affecting us, but we know that there is the snowpacks are a little bit lower than normal. The manager of operations, the street sweeping program has been completed. The city park washrooms, we've been working on that. We've also completed the RFP process for the campground services. We're just determining how we're going to go about that. The city's been looking at contracting that service to a service provider that would look after that. One of the things we're considering is how that service can better integrate community. Sign maintenance, patching, safety training. You can see for flagging, backflow prevention, fire safety training or fire safety checks in all of our buildings. Water and sewer comprehensive sanitary sewer flushing program. So doing our maintenance to make sure that we don't have any backups. Fire hydrant inspection programs, which are required annually by our insurance company. Water main flushing, that's to remove any potential solids that may exist in the water mains. Working on the data entry for the asset management program, so taking all of our asset inventory and implementing it into our software. Quarterly wastewater treatment plant maintenance, the cleaning of the contact chamber, so that's where some treatment happens. Departmental safety certification training. We had one of our operators just achieve a level 2, which we're required to have a level 3 operator, which we have one. One of our operators just achieved a level 2, which is a great step for him personally. and for our organization. We had a water main break at the airport, which is consistent with our asset management information that we're going to hear tomorrow night about how our infrastructure is actually performing in our community. The electrical, our annual pole replacement program is underway along with the assessment. Continuing voltage conversion program, so we're trying to maintain stability in our electrical utility, but also without limiting the amount of areas that are required to be shut down when we have to do routine maintenance. Identifying and consolidating our assets. So what we're doing is trying to reduce the number of assets that we have. So as we look at our asset management plan, we're not adding more to our asset inventory and creating more costs for us. We're actually trying to do cost containment and control. Continuing the door-to-door patrol to identify meter issues. So what we're doing is we've ongoing process of looking for potential electricity theft and just making sure there's been no tampering with electrical meters. From time to time, people will divert power around electrical meters, and we've seen that happen on several occasions. Mr. Mayor, those are the staff reports at this point. Just to follow up a little bit more on corporate services, I have been promoting, and I called it a little bit of, I don't know what the terminology be, but I've been trying to work hard for the city on achieving some gas tax grants. Our gas tax applications are in now. I've been speaking on behalf of our community on some of the things that we've been doing for asset management. I was in Cranbrook and in Kelowna promoting our asset management program on behalf of the province and doing a little bit of political brown nosing for us to get some money in this upcoming grant funding announcement. So we've been doing our piece and doing our regional contributions. So people are looking at us as leaders in asset management, and we are looking at hopefully receiving a few $1 million this year in grants. So we've got our fingers crossed. We have high expectations this year.
May I have a motion to receive the monthly activity reports? Councillor Washagan, Councillor Hammett, any discussion?
With regard to meter changes on the electrical meters, has it been the practice of the city to notify homeowners, property owners, when there's going to be a meter change or somebody's going to be looking at it physically? There's been some concerns expressed that I've heard about.
Mr. Mayor, the process generally from the Public Works Department is to put out notification to we can't necessarily go to each customer. We try to do it as a general canvas to the community that the electrical utility will be out doing inspections on electrical meters. Our process should be, they should be knocking on the door, being identified as working for the electrical utility, so there's not strangers walking on people's properties. The expectation is that our employees are identified with their orange coveralls and their business card with a lanyard, or with the lanyard with the business card from the city around their neck, being identified as municipal employees. If there is any concerns that is not happening, could they please forward them to us so we can definitely make that corrective step. But that is our expectation, that they should know that there is somebody on the property.
Yes, I will be giving you a report on that too, Mr. Allen, because I had a citizen come forward and they said they were away and somebody had been on their property and they were doing something with the meter in and overall and the whole bit. The neighbor had seen it. So I will be talking about that later.
Thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was just wondering what the Climate Action Revenue Survey is. I've never heard of it before, and I'd just like to get a little bit more information about what this is.
Sasha's still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. That's your department?
I'll have to bring back I'll bring back a report to council on what that is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any more discussion or questions? So all in favor of the motion to receive it? Councillor Thompson, no. Carried, so carried. Move on to our bylaw section. Our Chief Financial Officer will be discussing the sewer rates for 2015 wastewater rates amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Briefly, with the sewer rates amendment, council will be giving the final reading to the financial plan this evening, which included an increase of 5.48% for 2015 to begin in July 1st, 2015 for the sewer, for the wastewater rates. That would be effective for all the different customers equally.
It will help us cover the debt payments for the city park lift station that began in 2014, and as well allow the city to put $10,000 into the capital reserve for infrastructure replacement. So that works out to, for a residential customer, to about $3.84 per billing, or $23 per year.
Mr. Ellis.
Could I ask our chief financial officer just to explain a little bit about that, the borrowing process that happened for the lift station, and now that we've identified that, how it happens? Because we identified some short-term borrowing or long-term borrowing, and now we're just bringing that into play. Is that?
Yes, we actually do temporary borrowing when we're borrowing for a project until we determine exactly what the exact amount is going to be. So we get a little bit of temporary borrowing throughout the project, and then when we get to the end of the project and all the expenses are in, then we convert it to long-term borrowing. So we just pay a little bits of interest as we're in temporary borrowing, and then we convert it to long-term debt, and it's set for 5 years. The rate's set for 5 years on the borrowing, and every 5 years thereafter through MFA.
So that project was completed in about 2011?
The end of 2012.
End of 2012. So that's, you can see the timeline that it takes to process that stuff for amortizing and putting into the capital, and then getting the long-term borrowing in place. So there's some questions about why doesn't that happen quicker, but we have to close all the statements, make sure the auditors have reviewed everything, make sure that everything's in order, and then within that time frame, where it's about a 2-year process for it to actually become a long-term borrowing debt, so that it's following to this budget year.
Could I ask staff to give a clarification of the recommendation? Are we referring this to the April 20th? Because the way it reads, it asks to give the first 3 readings at the April 20th.
Yes, Worship, that would be correct. That would be because we'd like to give it more than 24 hours rest after the committee that will be, so we'd send it to the next meeting.
Okay, so can I have council give me a motion to refer for the first 3 readings of bylaw 2013 sewer regulation amendment to the April 20th regular meeting of council? Councilor Rashagan and Councilor Thompson. Any further discussion or debate? Have the gentleman in the back.
Yes, you're there. Wastewater, sewer. Can I presume that the residents of Johnson Flats who are not on the wastewater package would be exempt from these extra charges?
So if you don't have sewer available to your property, if the sewer line doesn't run by your property and you aren't able to hook up, then you won't be charged these.
That's what I wanted to hear. Yes, there's 7 or 8 of us down there that are not on city sewer, so.
No, the way we have it, for your worship, the way we have it right now, if you are able to connect to our sewer system, if the line runs by, then you are charged the basic and fixed.
It's up on top of the hill, it doesn't run down the hill. So.
Then you won't be charged any.
Okay, so we won't be exempt from those charges, is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, just one thing though, we do have community sewer services that we provide, and just to be clear that you're not totally exempt, because public washrooms are part of the sewer system. So there is an element of sanitary sewer that all residents pay for in the community. So that's an important distinction, that if you don't get the sewer service, you're not paying for the sewer service, but you may pay for a service of sewer within the community, or a service of wastewater in the community, an element of it that we all share.
I'm not sure I share that, but.
I think it's a community service, yeah, but indirectly, it's a service that is just like a park, just like a fire service.
Is that a form of a levy?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, but basically, the residents in Johnson Flats who do not have access to city sewer will be exempt from these charges. Is that a fair statement? Okay, thank you.
Lady in the back, please.
Gloria Cook again. What amount of the sewer charges are we charged then for use of the washrooms?
Mr. Mayor, that would be broken down out of a formula, so I'd have to, that would be broken down in the budget, so I guess that could be answered, but I couldn't answer it today. I'd have to get that answer if that question was there. I could ask the person to provide it in writing, and then we could get the response back at a later time.
Is that satisfactory?
Be interesting for you to report ASAP on that.
Mr. Mayor, one of the first priorities for us is the asset management and the operations of the city. These inquiries, we will definitely get to them, but we can break that piece out. But it will take some considerable amount of staff time to take those calculations.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Councillor Thompson.
Just a comment on this last issue by Ms. Cook. Those costs would be borne within the parks budget, not specifically for in the sewer service, sanitary sewer service. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Okay, so the motion on the table, all in favor? So carried. Again, to our Chief Financial Officer, the 2015 water rates amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Attached to bylaw 2008, which is the 2015 water rates amendment to take effect like the wastewater rates effective July 1st, 2015. It includes a 2.4% increase in water rates. For the year, for residential customers, this would equate to $1.65 per billing or $9.90 per year. This increase will allow $10,000 to go into capital reserve for infrastructure replacement.
So may I have a motion for council to give the first three readings to be referred to bylaw 2014 water regulation amendment at the April 20th regular meeting of council. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Vershegen. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Vershegen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before it comes back to us on the April 20th meeting, could we get the word wastewater removed from the background information?
Yes.
It says effective July.
Water regulation.
Yeah, it says wastewater rates will increase 2.4%. Four lines down.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Good catch. Good catch. Any other questions or concerns? Gentleman in the back.
Gordy Shaw. When can we expect the water meters to be in effect?
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, the process right now is the inputting of the data into our software system. The finance department is inputting the data into capture that and then start to disseminate it. What we'll be able to do then is we'll be bringing forward a report to council. The next little while, council's asked for a report on further options when it comes to the metering program. So we'll be reporting back to council probably in May. I'll have that report prepared. Once we have that, council consider the last components of the water metering program. I would suspect that they'll refer some stuff back to the Water Rates Committee for further consultation. And it would be recommended that council move into or the Rates Committee would recommend council to move into a mock billing period. So it would be a pretend billing. We'd stay on these flat rates for a little while, and then we'd move into a mock billing period of 2 years so we could really analyze how our water is going, how our consumption rates look. And then from there, it would allow the residents to understand better how their water is being used on their properties. So they have the time to adjust and look at, if they need to put some, for instance, a low flow on your garden hose, or if your kids were doing certain things, teaching going through the education process of getting into the schools and, talking about it holistically throughout the community a lot further. That would be the recommendation for council, but it'll be at the will of council to determine when the rates structure is put in place. But we can see right now with the education material that they're dealing with in California, how important it is with the with shutting off the, I watched a thing on CNN the other day that was, over the year was 3,000 gallons of water was used just by leaving the tap on when you were brushing your teeth. It was an amazing amount of water that we would never consider. And they actually are rationed down to 68 gallons a person per day. And the average person, this fellow was using 200 gallons per day just to do the basics. So it's an important component of education that we get. And as part of that education is setting the rate structure. So it'll always be the will of council. The short answer is at the will of council, but I think it'll be over some more community consultation and education over the next little while. So,
If I understand correctly, so the first item that council will be addressing will be the options. And then the second, will it not be necessary to complete the actual metering program before the mock build start?
Absolutely, the metering program completion, we're near completion. The report's gonna come to council. Council will look at those pieces. There's been a motion on the floor for council to continue on. There's probably just some small components of that program that just need to be adjusted, from what I would gather. But that'll be a decision of council and be discussed, and then if you're right, Mr. Mayor, then it moves on from there.
Any other further questions or concerns or debates? Okay, so all in favor of that motion? So carried. Again, to our Chief Financial Officer, the 2015 tax rates bylaw 2012.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. This is the 2015 tax rates presentation. Oh, I don't even have control. All right, so the process, the tax rates process, we began looking at the budget, going through the operating budget back probably November, end of November, mid-November. We're trying to get a little bit earlier every year, get more prepared every year, because it's quite the process. The community charter, section 197, states that each year after adoption of the financial plan, which will happen this evening, but before May 15th, the council must, by bylaw, impose property tax values for the year by establishing tax rates. Tax rates are based on the revised roll released by BC Assessment the last week in March, which was March 25th this year. So it's pretty tight timeline to try and get the tax rates here for April 7th, the beginning, and you'll notice in your bylaw that we have some blank spaces still, because our bylaw for the tax rates includes the municipal tax rate as well as the RDKB and the regional hospital district. The RDKB and regional hospital district don't pass their budgets until March 31st, so they just passed their budget. They'll be sending us their requirements, and then we'll set the tax rates based on that. Based on the conversion ratios given from the province, which I'll give a little bit more of an explanation of here. On the annual tax notice received by taxpayers, the city collects the municipal taxes, but we also collect levies for the regional district Kootenay boundary, the regional hospital district, school tax, police tax, municipal finance authority, and BC assessment. So I had shown you on the financial plan presentation kind of a pie chart of who we're collecting money for. And of your tax notice, about 40% of the tax notice is actually for the municipal portion, for the portion that the city collects. The rest of it, we collect it and we distribute it to these authorities. So if you take your assessed value from your assessment notice that BC Assessment provides in January, times it by the tax rates, and divide it by 1,000, you'll get the taxes payable, and that'll be your total taxes payable.
We do the math for you though.
Yes, we'll definitely do the math for you. So this is the face of the roll, as they call it. BC Assessment releases this every year. And then there's 2,945 folios behind it that give details on the properties. This is it all summarized into one sheet on the next net taxable values, and this is what we use to set the tax rates. As you can see, total, and this isn't total, this is net taxable, so this doesn't include any of the exemptions. This isn't the gross roll, this is the net roll. Total residential, $364 million was the value for the total residential properties, including vacant land. Utilities, $5.9 million. Major industry, $18.9 million. Down the right hand, for school, for hospital, and general. Some values are different. When we're setting the hospital rates, we'll use the hospital row to set the rates, because there are some exemptions that only apply for hospital properties. Same as the school tax rates. So basically, at the bottom, for general taxation, $456 million. You can see in the general, the first column bottom, $456 million worth of taxable property in Grand Forks.
Are these March 31st?
These were as of October 31st of last year.
October
31st, yeah. So that's usually when the cutoff is for BC Assessment on all of their changes, and then they all have the revised roll out now, and they should be sending us that, they do send assessments, usually the second week in January. So these are the tax rates. These were the 2014 tax rates around the region. It's always good to compare what our tax rates are like around the region so that we know if people are looking at this area, we want to be attractive to them in our region. So we've looked at some of the different rates for Cranbrook, Trail, Creston, Midway. The top row is the residential tax rate, even though I made this quite large. Grand Forks 2014 tax rate for residential was 3.8989. And as you can see across there, I believe there's only one other, Castlegar, that's lower. The others range up to 7.3, it looks like. So from about 3.1 to about 7.3. And a lot of that is dependent on if there's major industry that supports the tax base in the city too, and how much major industry and the distribution. So you can see utilities rate. The utilities rate is capped by the province. The highest it can be is the greater of 40 or 2.5 times your business rate. So we're always looking at that to make sure it doesn't go over the greater of those two rates. Major industry, it's the only 4 in the region have major industry: Trail, Grand Forks, Midway, and Castlegar. You can see what Grand Forks major industry rate is there, which we'll be discussing in a little bit.
Before we move from that, Ms. Shepherd, I think that's one of the most important things that council considers right now is that that number there. It's one that we want to keep in your mind, and also the residential tax rate. You can see where we stand on the spectrum, but the reality for us is some of those communities are actually putting away proper reserves. Cranbrook, in some respect, Roslyn, for their infrastructure, so that's why the rates may be up a little bit because of the asset management planning that they've been doing. But our industrial tax rate is one that we're really going to have to be cognizant of, because it's a way to attract more business, but it's also a way to deter more business. So this is one of the controls that council has. That council sets that rate, you can drive business out of the community. Council sets that rate favorably, and it attracts more business.
All right, so another rate that's always receives a lot of discussion and helped us a lot for our open for business is the Class 6 commercial rate. You can see Grand Forks is fairly competitive in that rate. Recreation and nonprofit and the farm, which are very small amounts when it comes to total taxes collected. So who pays the taxes? We're looking to collect just under $3.1 million in municipal property tax in 2015. Just almost 50% of that will be from residential property taxes. About 2% from utilities. Rec and nonprofit, and farm will say 0 because it only does 1 decimal place, and then I believe they're at about 0.1 and 0.2, so it didn't even really show up on the pie chart. Business, just about 20%. Major industry, 28% of our tax base. Okay, can you open the one? So there are 3 options attached to the bylaw for council to consider for the tax rates. Thank you. So the revenue requirement for 2015 is $3,047,841. That is revenue that is required to have a balanced budget as presented in the 2015 to 2019 financial plan that's coming for adoption this evening. So 2014 shows the actual assessments are on the top for 2014. The assessed value was 457 million last year. This year we're at 452 when we take out, you'll see at the bottom that says section 353 LGA Local Government Act. That's our utilities that pay a 1% grant in loan. Once you take that amount out, we're at 452 million. Option 1 is to increase the prior year's revenue by 4.96% as per the financial plan, and using the same conversion ratios. So what the conversion ratios, that's how we're dividing up what we need into the different classes. The conversion ratio will tell you, you see down the next step where it says multiple. So the residential on option 1, just with a flat 4.96%, residential increase to 4.0882. And then what you see underneath multiple is known as the conversion ratio, and that says how many times the residential rate is this rate gonna be. So for class 2 utilities, it says 9.78. So the residential rate's 4.0882, times it by 9.78, and then you'll get the utilities rate of 40. So we tried to break it down with the same pieces, same proportion of taxes that all of the rates, and that's what this is, using the same conversion ratios. Everybody that's class 1 will pay the same proportion of that puzzle, that pie that we showed, 50%. Class 2 will pay the same proportion as last year. However, because we decreased our assessment roll by about 1.5% this year, we have to offset the tax rates 1.5%, well, approximately 1.5% up to offset the decrease in assessment to get the same amount of revenue. So what happened this year, if we set the same conversion ratios, was we ended up going over in utilities, the class 2, over the 40. And I mentioned earlier that there's a cap on utilities rate of 40 or 2.5 times the business rate. Our business rate's quite low, so that works out to about 24. So we can't go any higher than 40. So after I set them the same as last year, same share of the pie as last year, I had to move the utilities rate down to 40 to the cap, and then keep the rest of them the same. So this is what we ended up with on this option 1. Almost the same share of the pie this year. So as you'll see, if we keep going down a little bit, perfect right there, Di, thanks. So that sets our major industry rate, which consists of Interfor and Roxel, to 45.5. Sets our light industry to 11.97, business to 9.77, as you can see from there. So setting that at 45, so in our financial plan, we had stated that part of setting the tax rates would be to look at all of the areas around, all the places in our region and compare. So, Di, can you just flip back up to the PowerPoint for me? Over to the PowerPoint. Yeah, that's good. So if we flip back here to the third one down, the major industry rate, let me make it just a little bit bigger. You can barely see that. Perfect. So that would raise our Grand Forks major industry rate from 43 to over 45, which would make us the highest in the region. So just a note on that. Can you go back to the other one now? I wish I had a flip to go from program to program. Excellent, thank you. So option 2, it says lower end major industry by 25,000. That's actually incorrect, I'm sorry about that. It should say keep major industry rate the same as 2014, because that was the goal in option 2, is to let's set the rates and see what the rates will look like if we try and keep that major industry rate down to 43.39, the same as in 2014. So what it does to the residential rate is it puts it up to 4.16, which is still quite reasonable in comparison to the other rates. It caps the utility rate at 40, keeps the major industry rate at 43, and adjust the other 3 rates accordingly. So that brings us in exactly, you'll see on the bottom, calculate exactly what the revenue is and from each share. So that brings us in right at our revenue requirements. So then I showed you option 3, which is the exact same tax rates as last year. And just as I mentioned before, because the roll decreased this year, that ends up, if you look down at the bottom at the revenue requirements, we don't meet our revenue requirements for those because the assessment roll has gone down. So we would have to increase those rates to offset the decrease in assessment roll. So these are the 3 options. I am recommending option 2. If there are any questions.
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, I think we know that industry doesn't get a vote at the when it comes to, they don't generally try to express their concerns, but we know that industry provides the jobs in the community, who in turn pay some of the residential taxes in our community. So when we look at what industry pays, I want to be clear that I'm not advocating for industry, but I know that industry plays a big role in how we operate as a local government. They play stewardship roles. They also they pay more than that $43 that you're looking at. The residential tax rate, if they have 100 people working for them, those 100 people, if they're living in the city, there's 100 residential tax notices that are supported by by the income that they get from the industry. It's an important thing for council to consider is the, in some respect, you know, industry has a stewardship and responsibility role to play in the community, but it's also important to nurture and preserve industry, because we know the value of it in our community. When we lost Canpar, we know that the communities, when they go through a process of losing a mill, they go through these processes where they lose their major tax contributor. If you lose one of them, the burden falls onto the residents, unless we generate revenue from somewhere else or reduce our services substantially. But they do play a major role in the revenue that we receive in the community. So that's an important piece for council to look at. So we're getting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make the resolution as recommended on option 2. And if I may just put it to what our CEO mentioned, industry pays more than their fair share as far as I'm concerned when it comes to, well, as Mr. Allen put it, but you also got to consider that industry doesn't use our services, or Intrafor can't walk into the pool, but they paid for it. Intrafor can't walk into the arena, but they paid for it. They pay more than their fair share of a lot of things that they don't benefit from.
And they can't vote.
That's right, and they can't use our parks, and they can't walk down the sidewalk.
And they're both wonderful corporate citizens, both industry drops on and before, so.
Gentleman in the back.
You say that with trepidation. Barry Jarvis, just one quick question if I could. What is our net taxable residential year to year, 2013 to 2014?
Ooh, I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, you'd mentioned a drop of 1.9%.
And that was in the total overall role. Some of the different classes had changed different amounts. So.
Okay, because I know my personal residence dropped 2.6%.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if residential dropped considerably more than industrial.
No, I don't believe it did, from my general recollection. I can make sure that I have both the revised rules on the website for you so that you are able to compare them on residential. Like that face of the world that I showed, I could make sure that we have both of them on there so that you are able to compare. There was quite a bit of fluctuation, but that was an average for all the classes that went.
Okay, that's what I didn't know.
Yeah,
I was just curious as how much our houses actually dropped last year in assessment values.
I'm not sure it's exactly residential, and we would want to break up residential with the property, not vacant land also probably too, but as long as you had those side by side, you would be able to figure that out pretty, a little calculator if you wanted to, and I can make sure it's on the website.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before we continue any more discussions, we have a motion on the table for resolution, so all in favor of using option 2, so carried. So now we'll put a motion to refer the first 3 readings with option 2 at the April 20th regular meeting of council. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ross. So now we'll have a discussion or debate. All in favor? So carried. Now our Manager of Development and Engineering Services. Topic is to amend the current zoning bylaw by rezoning property located at 832 64th Avenue from current R1 single to 2-family residentials to R4 rural residential, and review the sustainable community plan designation to determine if an amendment is required.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, we've received an application to rezone a property located at 832 64th Avenue. It is currently zoned as R1, and the applicant is proposing to have it rezoned to R4, which is rural residential. The city's sustainable community plan has designated this low density residential. However, if you look here, these properties that are already zoned R4 are also in that same designation. So, would it require an amendment to the SCP? Not in my opinion at this point. So the applicant is proposing to use the property for a market garden, a greenhouse, an orchard, hayfield, and he would like to raise some chickens. So that is the subject property. there. That is the zoning. And that is the sustainable community plan designation. That is the property in question right there. And that is the back of the property. So this will, of course, trigger a public hearing. So council has the ability to give the bylaw first 2 readings and then go to public hearing. This is not something that needs to go to the Ministry of Highways because it's not within 800 meters of a highway. And basically, we're asking committee of the whole to recommend to council to direct staff to draft the appropriate bylaw, proceed with the notification to the surrounding property owners, publish notice in the Gazette for 2 consecutive weeks, and hold a public hearing in accordance with the local government laws.
Can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Crog, Councillor Shagan, discussion or? Councillor Hammond.
This property, they're wanting to use it as a farm, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But most of the people down there are using their properties as farms.
Yes, except he wants to have a farm, like a crop, which is not allowed in the R1 zone. It's allowed in the R4 zone.
Any other questions? Councillor Crog.
Oh, just a comment. There's a lot of land in that area that's suitable for farming, but not a lot of it gets farmed. There's the small, like people have gardens and stuff, and there's a lot of chickens somewhere. And but yeah, they're trying to just follow all the rules and stuff like that. And then it would attach, right? If you go back to the actual zoning, look at it. Yeah, so you can see it's gonna attach the R4, so it would just be the brown with a finger going up. And they would utilize that property quite well.
Councillor Hammond.
So the property on the corner that's vacant, it's just a hayfield, is that privately owned or is that city owned?
No, that's privately owned.
Privately? So would it make sense, or is it possible to just rezone that whole corner?
Also consulting with the owner first, because we don't just generally move along and down zone or change zoning on property without the request.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused because there is something called urban agriculture. So when anybody within that zone, it's R1, wants to grow food, they have to rezone instead of just practicing urban agriculture? Because we have a policy in place about, I mean, I know a lot of people who already have greenhouses and are growing food and have orchards and poultry in the city and are practicing urban agriculture.
Well, he wants to have farm animals, and that's not allowed in the R1 zone. The chickens are not allowed in the single family zone.
68 chickens.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that happens when we update our sustainable community plan or our official community plan, and even the zoning bylaws, those are the things that we seek the input from residents, because as time changes, the community evolves. So the community, what Councillor Ross was talking about, is maybe that's just it's a generally accepted statement, but that has to become part of the official community plan or the sustainable community plan. It's just part of our evolution. Maybe years ago, people said there's no way in heck that we'll ever have chickens in our neighborhoods. Well, now more people want chickens in the neighborhood. That's just an evolution. So as we move towards that process, it allows us to obtain information back from residents on how we evolve our sustainable community plan. And that's usually done every 5 years to make sure that we're not being, taking the same mindset as we had several years back. So that may be coming in the next, I think last time we did it was 2011. We may consider doing it again in 2016, 2017. That's generally the best practices.
But we already have chickens in our communities, a few residents that have them, so how does that figure out?
Sometimes they're legal, sometimes they're not.
How do we enforce that?
Well, that comes back down to the bylaw issue, Mr. Mayor, and the practices where we send the bylaw officer, so we get the complaint in for our bylaw process. If we receive the complaints, then we attend the site.
Councillor Hammett, and then Councillor Crowe.
How does the rezoning of the property into R4 affect property values?
In neighboring,
Well, the owner's property value or in general?
if, Mr. Mayor, if there was a land lift, if there was a greater density, if they were getting more value, then the city would consider that as part of a, we might consider having we don't generally give land lift to properties without the city getting some sort of benefit. Just like a developer wanting to change densities onto a property, they leverage that for instant equity. Their value went from something from $10 to $100, and they're just unjustly rich. At the end of the day, what we do is we may have an amenity contribution bylaw where we consider those things. What we're doing right now is we're talking about this. I don't believe there is generally an appreciation in the value from R1 to R4. It doesn't change the density. It just changes the uses. So I don't think that there is an enrichment.
I was just wondering if it devalued the property at all by making it agricultural rather than multi-residential.
If they go for farm status after that, they go be class 9, they can improve their farm status and they can get the class 9 status, which does reduce their overall costs. So there is an effect on the community overall if they do get class 9 status, because then they pay less taxes, and then the greater portion of the community has to absorb those costs, as we saw in the tax rates. So our tax rates went from 3.89 to 4.1%. If we lose 1 or 5, there's a ratio in there that'll affect the overall tax rate in the community. So that's why we have general balance in our zoning. But one-offs, they do happen.
Councillor Crowe.
Yeah, just saying that they're trying to dot the i's and cross the t's. I have property that's R1 and part of my property is R4. And yes, a lot of people have greenhouses, like a huge part of Grand Forks has greenhouses and gardens, and they produce food. Where the issue really kicks in is once you start bringing in livestock. Yes, there are chickens all over the place, and if they don't bother the neighbors, and nobody ever says anything about them. So we're not going to start a chicken roundup and start sending out a bylaw enforcement. Barbecue. We're not going to do that. But yes, they're asking permission that they can actually legally have chickens. And I can't remember if it's other livestock that can fit into that one as well. So it goes back to the concept of if you're in a subdivision, you're not raising cows and pigs and chickens and disturbing your neighbors, right? So they want you to be zoned for that if you're actually going to be doing the husbandry and all that stuff.
Councillor, we're shaking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out that we're not voting on this right now. We're just pushing it forward to a public hearing.
So are there any discussions other than that? So all in favor of the motion? So carried. Again, from our Manager of Development Engineering Services, we're here to amend the current zoning bylaw by adding the permitted use of a tool and equipment rental facility, the I2 General Industrial Zone.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We're looking at adding the tool and equipment rental establishment to the I2 zone. It's currently in the highway commercial and I1 zone. We were just looking, this is more of a housekeeping item. We were just looking more to expand the potential for economic development in that zone. Being that I1 and I2 is so close, it just made sense that it would be allowable as a permitted use in that zone as well. Again, this will trigger a public hearing. We will have to advertise as part of our statutory requirements. We'll also send notification to the surrounding property owners and then have the public hearing.
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, just to elaborate a little bit, currently, just an example of what we're looking at here is you can store heavy equipment on the site under the current zoning bylaw, but you can't rent it from there. So you can store as many pieces as you like, as long as they fit on there, but you can't rent them from the site. So what we're doing is expanding those opportunities.
Thank you for clarification. So may I have a motion? Councilor Verschagen, Councilor Thompson. Any further discussion or debate? All in favor? So carried. We now move on to our question period from the public. Does anyone from the gallery have any questions or concerns? Yes, sir.
Mayor and council, I have a car wash.
Maybe you'll identify yourself for the record.
Oh, my name is A. Martins. I run the OK Car Wash. And the way it's built, it needs a piece of equipment to suck the dirt out. And I've had a good relationship with the city. And the city was allowing their men, and I was paying to come and suck it out. And we've had a change of policy, and they don't want to let that happen anymore. Cal from LaFontaine, if you know him, Argosy, he has a piece of equipment and it doesn't do the job. He told me not too long ago when I was talking to him again, is there some way we can get it lowered? He says shovel. Now I'm 68 and I don't like to shovel too much. You know, I don't like to go back into the dark ages when we have wonderful men at our city and a wonderful piece of equipment. I can't see when we say we're open for business, why I can't pay the city to come and so that I'm not shoveling. You know, because it's hard to arrange for some of those others, I put dirt on that one back lot, and I don't think that's a proper thing for our city to start stacking dirt on the back lot when we have the equipment to do it. So I would appreciate if we could have a working relationship and be open for business. You know, I was told that we don't have proper insurance or something like that. But you know, the other day I was broken into. And so I came in the middle of the night, 4 a.m, and I couldn't find him, but I could see he'd been there. So I just got back home to bed and the alarm went off again. This time he had tried, the city has a meter there. So he broke into where the meter is, and there's seals in there and everything else like that. And he pulled all these back, and I thought he thought he could get in without having the alarm go off. Well, little did he know, it still went off. So in the morning I phoned, and the city comes, and the city looks after me. They get the meter going, so I'm paying my electricity, so everybody's happy, and so that it can operate. And so it's not as if the city equipment doesn't go on private property and for insurance purposes, and there's men working there. I know that they do that because they've done it for me on some other things where you have something to do. So I don't see why we can't get along. You know, and I don't, you know, I was told to go to Castlegar and hire someone. To me, that's retarded. And I don't like when Cal tells me to shovel. You know, and the city was wonderful in that, you know, Jesse James has a truck, and they said I could use their piping. So I tried that, but his truck is antique. He's Mickey Moused it, and it won't hook onto city piping. So he can't do it. LaFontaine can't do it, and I'm shoveling. And I don't feel that's right. And so I'm asking for the city to give me a little bit of a helping hand. I don't want it for nothing. I never have. And we have the men there. Tell you, I think we got some of the best men. And I've been in Grand Forks for a long time. if I have to shovel a few more years till maybe council changes or something else changes, then I'll be back to, I'm sure the city will again join with me and letting me pay them for their wonderful man, you know, and I've talked with you, right? And I've had the city man, because when I first explained it, he's in charge down there, and he came up and he went with me. We walked in the car wash and I showed him exactly. And he agreed with me. But we as a city have set that policy, and I don't think that all the time we should be doing everything for everybody. But when we have the proper equipment and we have the proper men and nobody else has, I don't think I should be going to Castlegar to get, I think they should make their money over there. They shouldn't make it in Grand Forks. My money should stay here and pay my good men in Grand Forks, so they can keep on coming in my car wash and buying a tire and doing other things in Grand Forks, like helping pay for the arena and everything else. So I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Martins, for your input and your support of the city and praise for them. Unless I'm incorrect on this, the meter issue is an essential service that the city does have to supply, but doing other services for private businesses falls into different parameters of the city.
It does.
But I will address that to our CAO, Mr. Allen. Take it from there and you'll explain more in detail.
I agree with that too, but I don't expect it when the city's going out and the men are on, usually there's quite a bit of lead time. So when the man's going out there and they've got a little bit of time anyway, I mean, for me to pay him is better than for you to pay him.
No, I understand that, but at the same token, you're just one of many then that would be in a lineup asking for the city's services, at which point when they do have to do their normal work as servicing the city, cleaning the roads, it won't be available to give the full input there. Their maintenance work has to be done for the citizens of the city first and foremost.
Absolutely.
If there was after, but if we start that, where does it end?
Well, when it's a specialty thing and no one else can do it, and there's lots of lead time, and they've done it in the past, and they tell me they could fit it in now, I mean, why, when they tell me that, are they lying to me?
No, but with all due respect, but then also we're competing with private business. If the city,
Not in Grand Forks, we're not. Because there's no one else in Grand Forks who can do it. I mean, you're competing with a shovel. Me shoveling is what you're doing. And that's going back to the dark ages.
I fully understand that concept. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city, like you pointed out, the city does have $127 million in assets that we're required to maintain. As we get asked to do these one-off projects, like you pointed out, it takes away from our ability to look after our key projects. What will happen is we used to do what was called a custom work order, and we were neglecting our own assets. We were looking after privately owned assets. So what happens is we start to look after the private businesses, then we start to crush our own local economy by taking just that one small piece of work away from a contractor, whether it's a shoveling contractor or an equipment contractor with a piece of equipment. We start to take the ability away from businesses to open up here that would provide these services and support the city. As the city acquires assets and we purchase these things, the taxpayers only buy them to look after the city-owned assets, not privately owned assets. That's a key thing for us to look at here is if we start looking at our city-owned assets for looking after private enterprise, we start to get into a situation where we're providing an unfair playing field for others. And I think the most important thing for us to do is maintain consistency. And that's why we've invoked a practice where we do not compete with private business. And we will look after our city-owned assets first with the city-purchased equipment. And we do not look after private assets, Mr. Mayor.
Well, you came by and looked at the meters and did that. I mean, you came by and you're doing other things. To me, I can't fathom this when I'm a private guy and there's nothing else available and I'm shoveling, you know, and then what happens because I'm not 100% good, I'm a bit of a lazy bugger too, so I'm not shoveling quite as soon as I should. And so we're getting a little dirt in our city pipes, which I paid for and I put in myself. See, I don't mind. When I built the OK Tire, I paid for the transformers. When I built OK Tire, they changed the transformers. I said, what happened to the old transformers? He says, well, they wore out. I paid for new transformers. I says, well, where are my old ones? Well, they're put to good use. I understand that. I understand helping the city and being together with the city and paying for transformers twice. I can understand that. But I can't understand that when they say they have something and they can't help. That doesn't make sense to me. Then city to me is we're like family. We're trying to help one another. And when I get stepped on instead of being helped, then I say, why am I in the city? I love it. Grand Forks is the most beautiful place. And I'm staying, even if I get stepped on. But I want you to know how I feel. I don't like to be stepped on, and I don't think that's fair. I think we should work together. And I think that's part of the city, working together. I'm not trying to get nothing for nothing. If you have to up the rate on the truck, fine. And I'm ready to pay for good men. Because I know I deal with them and we have real good men. We have a beautiful place, but we want to have that too. We don't want to have it so that I get kicked off and lock the door. Is that what we want? I mean, instead of trying to encourage business, I feel we're stepping on them. And that's not a proper thing. I'm all for private, I'm private, and I'm all for private. But when there's no one else that can do it, and the city has the men and the equipment, and I don't expect them to jump. But when they can fit it in and work together, if we don't believe in working together, then there's something wrong. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Your comments are fully acknowledged. We will. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it just seems, thank you for your passionate plea. Yeah, like from my perspective, it doesn't seem unreasonable. I mean, considering, like we always say, oh, well, what's going to happen? Are people going to be lining up at the door? And I think we can consider things on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we do have some very expensive equipment that we have to look at. We just did our budget. We're looking at repairing equipment that actually needs replacing. And we need to think in the future about these really expensive pieces of equipment that we have that really sometimes does stand idle. And when the gentleman says, you know, when and previously there were times where the work team said, we have this opportunity right now, we can come in and we can get that job done for you. It sounds like this is an opportunity for us to earn revenue to put us into our reserve, which we would use for eventually replacing equipment. And we could put that revenue into reserve and certainly consider these opportunities on a case-by-case basis. And we don't want to compete with local business, but if there's no local business here that can do that specific job, to me, personally, it does not seem like an unreasonable request.
Thank you.
So well said. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I don't understand what it is you're shoveling, Amy.
Dirt.
But from where?
Well, when you wash your car, excuse me, when you wash your car, it goes into a grid there and there's a holding tank. And so that all fills up with because we as a city are doing a good job sanding the road, and that road from the sanding comes into my car wash, and then it needs to get cleaned out. And so the last few times what I've done is with a wheelbarrow there, and you're filling it in and then you're bringing it to the end, or some of it I roll out onto that back lot that I have there, and I don't like that. But otherwise, Cal says he'll sit there with his fancy machine because it won't fit in outside the door, and he says, you shovel. And I'm running with a wheelbarrow real fast while his fancy, expensive piece of equipment can't get in and do the job. He's sitting there and sucking out by the wheel bar. When the city drives in and there's machine fits right in the doors, and he just goes on and it just sucks it out, just, you know, and it's not required that often. But it's, you know, if you went, the one time, because we discussed that with the city before, and then the chief down there, he came up with another gentleman, we walked in there and I showed him exactly. I mean, it's been a wonderful working relationship.
Yeah, I'm here.
But it doesn't, there's too much dirt to do by hand.
You know, I hear what you're saying, but I guess my concern is that if we start something, and then it's a revolving door. Have you considered, rather than doing the shoveling yourself, hiring some youth to come in and do the shoveling and paying them rather than paying the city?
Well, because of the way, when they come, they don't tell you exactly, even Cal, he fits it in and all of a sudden he's there. And so then if don't have somebody there quick, by the time you arrange somebody, you're paying hours for nothing to happen, so.
Well, so that, I mean, can you not coordinate with, you know, and set something up so that it's mutually beneficial both to you, the youth, with the unemployed, and Cal?
No, it doesn't work properly with wheelbarrow. It
I just
doesn't.
have one question, Mr. Martins.
Sure,
Number one, are you referring to the city's sucker truck?
right,
Okay, secondly, how often a year do you need this done?
maybe twice.
Okay.
It's not that often, but yeah,
Okay, you're referring to the sediment and sludge.
right, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that we would actually have to, because the city did it before, we did it with, I would say, a level of recklessness. We did it because we weren't charging out the proper rates. Our Blue Book rates were cheaper than the private contractor rates. We were actually defeating the contractors in town. The contractors could not compete with us. If we charge our actual rates, based on the depreciation of that equipment, which we're required to do under PSAP, under the law, we're required to amortize that debt, the wear and tear, we pay a mechanic, and we put the insurance in. If I was actually bring the real rate forward, the customer would be actually here talking to you and saying, this is ridiculous, the amount of money you want to charge me for this. We have a piece of equipment that we can't even afford to own when it comes right down to it. Based on the actual depreciation and amortizing, which we're going to talk about tomorrow night in asset management. But the reality for this city is that is an incredibly expensive piece of equipment. If we compound the insurance, the depreciation, the wear and tear, the mechanic, the staff time to go ahead and process the invoice, because it's not just going down and processing an invoice. You have a finance department that has to deal with this. We have to add 15% on top of that because we still have to process this through our VADM system, and we have to take it through our whole network. This is not just a drive-through situation where we just drive through and we pay somebody and it's done. There's still the finance department, there's the public works department, there's the records keeping, there's all these other elements to it. So Mr. Mayor, I'm just in respect to this, I would just caution council on proceeding with something like this, because it will be an added staffing component that we'll have to consider, because our staffing levels are also set at our current value and needs as an organization. If we start going outside of this, we have to consider all the departments that are affected. And like you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, it's just this one point, but when does it start? When does it stop? And when do we get to the point where it becomes too expensive for us?
My only comment on that is to address both sides of this issue, the cities and Mr. Martins, and referring to Councillor Ross's statement, and yourself, if there is no private business in the city or close proximity, I would address staff, would we be able to at least put these numbers forward for Mr. Martins to see what kind of cost, and if he would still be interested?
I'm ready to pay the going rate for that truck anytime and the men on it.
And
That's never been a question.
And the second issue would be, how often does the city use that truck, or does it sit idle?
Mr. Mayor, our staffing complement is meant to look after flushing the sewers, for going out and dealing with water situations, fire hydrant maintenance, water main flushes. So there's 4 people on that crew that are looking after $56 million in assets. Their maintenance programs are set. Now, the truck does sit idle. We don't have spare staff kicking around the yard waiting to do extra jobs. What we're dealing with now is diverting some of our maintenance programs to go out and deal with this, because we have to plan the project. There may be staff time allocated to do these things. So, Mr. Mayor, anything is possible, but I'm just going to, if we have to undertake this process to evaluate the actual cost, it'll take this chief financial officer some calculating time and probably some administrative time. So anything can happen at the will of council.
My only concern is because we were just looking at our financial status and we're trying to encourage business and industry to stay by not scaring them away, by lowering the tax rates. But now inadvertently, we have an issue here where we're kind of shunning a person away. And like Councillor Ross said, let's just wait and see if there's a big lineup at the door, for these services. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Abe, when you built your car wash and
Right.
you had the pit,
Right.
knowing that it was going to be filled, what was your plan to deal with it when you constructed that facility?
Well, I was born dumb. I didn't know all the ins and outs. If you knew everything, I would be God. And I'm far from that. I'm just an average working man, and I never had a clue to that. And so once you shovel it out once or twice, then you start looking around how we can do this, and you can't find anybody, but the city had a machine. And so then when you talk with them, they say that when they're doing their thing, they can fit it in, because sometimes they only have a half a tank. And they gotta clean the truck anyway. So the men are there, the men are available. If I talk to the men, then it's a different thing than when I'm talking to you, because they tell me sometimes they can fit that in, they got elapsed time. And so I'm paying their hours. So either the guys there are giving me a little bit of bullshit, or else it can be fit in when we work together. This is a question of whether we want to work together or not. That's what this is. And I can't see why we can't work together. I mean, I'm paying good taxes. And I don't see, and I'm, like I said, I'm not always the most energetic, so sometimes there's a little extra dirt going in the pipe. I paid for the pipe to go in there too, because the city said you need water and sewer before I even built a car wash.
Councillor Ross has a question, but before I just want to ask you a quick question. How long has the city been doing this service for you?
Well, the car wash has been there about 10 years.
So it's almost grandfathered.
Yeah.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I was just wondering, how long is it, when the city staff are there, how long does this job actually take for them to do the job?
Maybe 2 hours.
2 hours?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 hours. Right, okay. Good to know.
I actually told them, I said, you park the truck down and you come in, I'm buying you coffee, and you keep the truck meter rolling, and I'm paying. I'm thankful for the service, and I'm thankful for the good guys we have here, and I'm ready to pay. But I want to pay the going rate for the truck. I never expect nothing for nothing, and I was even insinuated that I'm trying to cheat the city. Now, that's a complete falsehood. When I'm told to shovel and to get somebody from out of town, and that I'm trying to cheat the city, that's not the truth. That's never been.
Well, it's just interesting to know, because if we're trying to determine what the actual real charge or cost is, and it's.
Value of
Well,
actual
We need
equipment.
to know how many hours.
Right, the truck has a set rate, all equipment has. And you just,
Anyway,
right?
okay.
You know what, anybody can figure that out, what a piece of equipment is worth.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm just curious, listening to Abe here talking, and what the staff has said about the actual behind-the-scenes work involved in dealing with this type of transaction. I'm curious if there's any other ad hoc, on-demand services provided to other businesses in the city, or does the city get regular requests? And if so, could it be that the city could have some sort of ad hoc billing or way of dealing with this that would streamline this and make it possible for the city to help businesses, so they don't have to hire somebody from an hour's drive away, that's all.
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, in 2012, we had what was called a custom work order situation. We were contracting our grader out, we were contracting our sweeper out, we were contracting out our employees on a regular basis, and none of our maintenance was getting done. The process scope crept right out of was basically to the point where we were looking for projects to work on rather than our own maintenance projects. Our staff was to the tune of $15,000 a year to a staff member that they were working on extra time, they were doing extra things that the city was paying benefits for. So the overtime that was resulting to our own maintenance of our own projects was starting to creep out of control. That's why we had to stop it, Mr. Mayor. We were at the point right now, we were at the point where our custom work orders were consuming a considerable amount of our time, and I don't know where it started. The situation though was contractors, when somebody makes a purchase of a piece of equipment that's $250,000, nobody's going to do that. But when we found Mr. James bought a street sweeper, we stopped doing that service for the other places that were requiring street sweeping, and then Mr. James's business started to flourish, and he was able to employ people in the community that were creating a more robust economy. Once we were doing it, it was our own employees that were doing it, so they were just consuming everything, and there was no growth in our community. With the purchase of a Vector truck, whether it fits or doesn't fit, there was never an intention to tell the customer that we were going to tell him how to do his business. But at the end of the day, if there's somebody else providing a service and it's not quite right for their needs, that happens every day, whether it's with plumbing services or insulation services or roofing materials. I mean, there's always challenges when somebody's putting a roof on a house or pouring concrete. They buy different pieces of equipment to deal with those things. And it's generally not provided by the city, Mr. Mayor. It's generally provided by outside sources. We have to look after our own businesses first, and I would just encourage council to keep that foremost in the forefront.
My only comment to that is I do agree, and I said originally that we do not want to compete with private business. But having said that, on the same note, if this service does not exist,
Amen.
then possibly we should try to consider.
I think we should be friendly with one another, and when it doesn't happen, I think we should be city, which means family, and we should work together and not worry about whether I don't want no other graders or anything else like that either. I can understand that, but when there isn't, then I think we should work together, and I can't see that why we can't be family. To me, I'm living here, this is family, and that's the way it should be, and I expect to pay.
Councillor Thompson?
Just a couple of things, through you to our CEO. There is another car wash in town. Have we had requests from that business to offer assistance in that respect?
Not that I'm aware of.
It's not been going lately, but I don't know how their building isn't long like mine, so it's completely different.
So I guess my second question then is, and frankly, I'm not in support of the city providing these kinds of services, but if the majority of council were to overrule the current policy and change it, would the expectation be from you that you would call up and want the service you would dictate when the services were going to be provided?
It has never been that way, and I don't expect it to be that way. I told them when the city's going, basically when it's getting full, I says, in the next 2 weeks, can you do it sometime? And they've always, when you're got the truck out and you're doing and you got some time, can you fit it in? And that's the way it's been. And I mean, I'm not trying to demand anything. I'm just trying to work together. I mean, isn't that what family's about? Not worrying about, you're worrying about your equipment that I'm paying for, and you're saying I might get a penny. To me, that's pathetic. I've paid for that equipment as a taxpayer.
Mr. Mayor.
And when we're paying together, then we should work. I mean, when there's not,
Mr. Martins?
what's that?
We have a respectful
Yes.
workplace policy, Mr. Mayor, and I
Yes.
think that's an important piece for us to keep in mind here.
Yes.
Nobody should be using that type of calling people pathetic or anything like that in the council meetings.
Please, Mr. Martins. refer.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I don't think that's, you know, I feel like I'm stepped on.
No, you made your point. That's
Okay.
understandable. Would council discuss this any further? Or
I just,
Councilor Ross?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what the reality is as our CAO has made clear to us, and I fully understand this, is if the real cost of doing the job becomes outlandish, then it's almost in the other person who owns this equipment and isn't adequate for them to do some retrofit, which maybe is just extending the hose to fit in, you know, like, and pay them a little bit more, and it would be worth their while to retrofit their equipment. I just think that.
I wish that we could all go there and take a look, and then you would understand the situation.
Well.
You know, I've talked to him about that.
Mr. Martins, my advice would be for you to put this all in writing, submit it to the city, and if there's any further need for any looking into this any further, we'll deal with this time, but we can't continue any longer on this
Okay.
discussion. Please put it in writing and the city will respond back.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other discussion from council? Do we have any other questions from the gallery? All right. Oh, sorry, good leading back.
Sorry to continue this a bit, but Gloria Cook, you as mayor and council and staff, Mr. CAO, and everyone are asking us, residents and taxpayers, to work with you together to make this a better community. And all that it entails, our costs and so on. Who is paying us for our time that we spend here and giving input and the like? You folks get a salary or a stipend. You are asking us for our input, our work. We have other things we could be doing. We could all just go away. You could do what you want. This man is giving you a very good opportunity to work together. The city crews have been seen many times without a job to do, collecting, sitting around. They can figure out their schedules and work it in to give this person a hand. In the future, this may not be needed because if it sells or changes are made to the situation that he has, it wouldn't be needed. But this is a work together situation. Why not? And as to considering all the costs, you better think about that one a little bit more. That's not gonna work too well. This area, people have come here, have tried to come here, and they can't afford to live here. It's too expensive. Add all those extra costs, and you're going to get more expense, more rate hikes, more taxes. That's the only way to get it. So we have to keep this down. We have to keep it under control. By doing this process, it's an interesting exercise to see what things cost, but to actually charge for it, where does it stop? And what can people afford? And we want people to move here. When this summer, a comment was found to be made by a person who was coming here considering moving here. They were in a restaurant and they found out that water meters were going in. They said they're going to relocate somewhere else because they didn't like that whole idea because of the extra costs, etc. Taxes are high here. People find it expensive to live here. especially for seniors and lower income people. We see this all the time in the line of work. So you must keep these things under consideration. We're working together, or we're supposed to be.
Thank you, Ms. Cook.
Thank you.
Still duly noted. We now have from our Chief Administrative Officer, immediately following the committee to whole meeting, council will hold an in-camera meeting. We recommend that we convene an in-camera meeting as outlined under Section 90 of the Community Charter to discuss matters in a closed meeting which are subject to Section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. And 91G, litigation or potential litigation affecting municipality. Be it further resolved that the persons other than members, officers, or other persons to whom council may deem necessary to conduct city business will be excluded from the in-camera meeting. Yeah, Councilor Hammond, Councilor Thompson, all in favor? So carried. We have a motion to adjourn this meeting. Councilor Thompson. Meeting is adjourned.